What is going on, Sens fans? Welcome to episode 22 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. And Brennan, first, before we even start, we want to thank everyone for the influx of subscribers we had over the last week. We went way over the 500 mark that we were trying to hit, and we have an internal goal that will now. I don't want to say make public, but we're trying to hit 1,000 before the season starts, which we think is possible. You guys are awesome, everyone who listens. Again, just like, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. It means a lot, goes a long way. So we are very happy with all the progress that we've made. It's 22 episodes in. It's been a lot of fun, honestly. And we're right in the middle of July here. A lot going on in Sens land. So we'll get into all of that. But Brendan, how are you doing on this Friday, July 7th?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we've got a couple signings to talk about. I've been patiently, not so patiently, awaiting the Alex DeBrincat trade all week, every single day. I've looked at my phone constantly and been refreshing and scrolling up on Twitter, and just nothing yet. So hopefully we're closing in. But yeah, just want to thank everybody as well. We are 429 subscribers from the 1,000 mark. So, I mean, this is episode 22, and we started this at the end of April, so it's been just over 2 months, like 2 months and a week or two. I mean, we're on pace to eclipse 1,000. So hopefully August isn't too dead, because typically August is like the dead month of the offseason after free agency. But hey, the longer this DeBrincat thing drags on, that's content for August right there. If it's like the end of July, the arbitration date, hopefully we don't get to that point. But I think we'll have some plenty of stuff to discuss, right? Like, I think the lineup for next season is going to look a lot different than we're projecting right now, just based on what they get and then who they sign and stuff. So I think late July and August could be a little more exciting than years past.
Yeah, like we said, lots going on in Ottawa Senators land. We got development camp just wrapping up. We have new deals for depth players that we can get into, and we will. Let's start with the one that kind of happened earlier this week. It was right after episode 21, so we didn't get a chance to touch on it, but we've talked about the player enough to have some kind of idea of where we both stand on where the guy is. So the Ottawa Senators re-signed Travis Hamonic to a 2-year 1.1 AAV deal with a no movement clause for Hamonic. In that deal, we both, I know we both had a lot of thoughts on it on Twitter at the time anyway. But it's, at the end of the day, it's a depth signing. So it's a depth defenseman, and that's what the team's calling it. If we want to believe it is or not, that's different. But I don't want to say initial reaction, because it's been a while, but after, they obviously signed Zach MacEwen to do a 3-year deal, but that's different. We'll get into that in a little bit. In a minute, sorry, I should say. So what are your thoughts on adding Hamonic to a pretty crowded and almost already slotted in blue line?
Well, I'm okay with it. I did figure that they would re-sign him. I thought it would be for 1 year. I think everybody did. The 2 years is a little weird. I'm guessing same with the no movement clause. I know people got angry about that. I don't really care about that. Like, it's whatever. I'm guessing it's just to get the cap hit down. Like, that was my assumption on the 2 years, because I know Dorian said originally they offered him a 1-year deal, and he said he wanted more money on it. So maybe it was like a 1-year, $1.1 million offer. And then he said, okay, I'll agree to the 1.1 million, but I need 2 years and I want a no movement clause. That's probably how the negotiations went. Like, he most likely said he'd take less money for that, which is fine. The ironic thing is his 1.1 million makes it even harder to keep DeBrincat for the year. I was doing the math again this morning. So I think he's all but gone at this point, just because of how, like, they wouldn't be making these signings if their plan was to keep him. It just doesn't help their cap situation. On Hamonic, I know, like, I was pretty critical of him because he gives me PTSD to the Eric Branson days of just this bigger defenseman, veteran guy, good leader and everything, absolutely, but he makes a lot of unforced errors with the puck. He's your classic, like, defensive defenseman who's not that good defensively. Like, he makes a lot of blunders in the defensive zone. He did have a decent season. I mean, I know people like to say he was great with Sanderson. I have a tweet which literally proves that he was not great with Sanderson. I'm okay with having him as the 7th defenseman. I said that earlier this summer too. I think he'd be a good number 7. The problem is Nikita Zaitsev syndrome with DJ Smith. Like, I'm terrified to even say, when the season starts, could he do the whole Shabbat, Chikrin, Sanderson thing on the left side and then keep, like, Hamonic in the top 4 on the right side? I pray that doesn't happen, but I'm sorry. Like, based on what we've seen from DJ, I'm pretty convinced that at some point when things aren't going perfectly, he's going to put Sanderson back with Hamonic, and he's going to revert to what we saw last year and just try to mix it up, and I do not like that potential at all. I think Hamonic should be a guy who's your 7th defender, who comes in for injuries or plays on the bottom pairing, plays like 13 minutes a night. He can be on the penalty kill blocking shots, that's fine. but he's not someone you rely on at this point in his career. He's just not that guy. Like, you can't have these errors anymore, right? So I'm fine with the signing. I'm fine with the money, 1.1, whatever, that's fine. But DJ Smith, like, man, do not treat this guy like Nikita Zaitsev. Like, you got to keep him on a leash. Like, he cannot be a critical member of this team.
Yeah, I had a huge problem with the signing at the beginning, but it wasn't the player. I like Hamonic, and I think he's a great, like you said, I think a perfect 6'7", whatever. Battle out for that last spot. Should not be playing 12 minutes. That is just known. Dorian said, and I'm going to mention that Dorian said, it's a huge theme of what I'm going to go on here, but he did say that their top four is pretty locked in. So any signing they make on the blue line would be for depth. So this should be for depth because their top four is locked in. He also likes to say that DJ makes the lineup decisions. So to me, once again, third time, Dorian said JBD has a spot to lose. He said that twice. He said it at the end of the year press conference in Belleville or interview in Belleville. And he said it again with the Locked On Senators podcast or in early June, I want to say they did it. So he said twice, it's JBD's spot to lose, and then signed him to a 2-year one-way deal. Now, motivation for the player, sure, but are you going to sit there and look us in the eyes and say that if Hamonic has a better camp than JBD, he's not going to be in that spot? That's fine. I find that hard to believe. I think JBD is a better player, and I think he's better served in that role. Problem that I have with what Dorian said too is at the end of your press conference, like just full on in April, he said we're comfortable giving Hamonic a 1-year deal. We've offered him we give him the opportunity to come back on a 1-year deal, and then you give him 2 years and a no movement clause. Look, I'm all for re-upping players who want to stay in Ottawa because as we're seeing with the DeBrincat situation, that's a bit hard to do. And not that he doesn't want to be here, but it's important to recognize that in a smaller Canadian market when people want to stay. And I love what Travis Hamonic brought. He's awesome with the media. He was great with Sanderson off the ice and maybe even on the bench, but together they weren't great together as a pairing. But there comes a point, and I think to me it speaks more to the GM's, priorities almost, right? You mentioned that they can't get DeBrincat now signed. If they wanted to, they'd have to move other money out because of this signing. I think it just came at a weird time, and I don't care about the 2 years because we'll talk about MacEwen again in a second, and I'll back that because I think that was a good signing. But the Hamonic one, he just kind of backtracked, and it makes him look kind of weak, let's say. And let's say it's a different scenario. Like if we're talking about Vladimir Tarasenko here, and it came out that Pierre was only comfortable giving him 3 years, and then they end up giving him 4 or whatever. Or like Korpisalo, right? 5 years is a lot. You're probably good 3-4 years, but if the 5th year gets him to stay, you do it because it's Korpisalo. He's going to be one of your best goalies. Hamonic's a depth defenseman. You can go and do that other way, like in other places. They just signed Matt and Paolo too. He's destined for the AHL now. There's no room for him. Like they can't keep him. So that's why it frustrates me.
And Hamonic can't be sent down either, just on that point, because he's got the no movement clause. He can't be sent to Belleville. The no movement clause
is you can't move down the 401, Travis. You are staying in Ottawa, which again, I don't mind, but that's one angle of it. It's just the angle that, I tweeted it initially. I was like, Dorian lied, and I don't want to say he lied. It was probably an exaggeration, but he backpedaled for a depth defenseman. That should tell you everything you need to know. I think it's incredibly frustrating. At the time that they got Hamonic too, 3rd round pick, I think it was worth it. At the time that they traded for him, though, do it in the summer. You did not need to do it at the deadline at that time. What was it, 15 games? Like just both transactions involving Travis Hamonic have been a bit of a gong show, and it's not because of the player. Like you can have your doubts about him defensively and all that, and like the PK actual numbers, I don't know how they were, but he was a key component to one of the best penalty kills in the league that can't be overlooked, and made Jake Sanderson, the stud defenseman, feel comfortable, which has been pretty noted. That's valuable. And I've said it 3 times now, I like Travis Hamonic. I just have such a problem with the way Pierre Dorion went about it. Why even say the 1-year thing at the end of the season in the press conference? Why even say that? Just say we might bring him back. That's fine. Saying we might bring him back on a 1-year deal, or we're comfortable bringing him back on 1 year, is so infuriating to me. And then you go and give him a 2-year deal. It's just a kick in the face as a fan, which a week ago, he said he likes being transparent with the fans. So I don't know what's going on here. I don't like it at all. It's infuriating, and I'm getting hot about it again. It was a week ago.
Well, Pierre has always been kind of known for this two faces of Pierre, the way he talks to the media and the fans and he says things, and then the way he actually goes about doing things. The classic example of that right now is then we don't negotiate through the media, but that's like all that's been happening all summer long here. So yeah, I mean, I understand your frustration, and with Hamonic, I'm more critical of the player and how I'm very concerned about DJ's use of the player. I just have the numbers. I'm going to talk about some numbers with Hamonic just because I don't think people ever care to actually like look at Hamonic's numbers. He's one of those guys that everyone just like accepts as a veteran who's a good leader, so it doesn't matter if he's bad on the ice. So this is just with Sanderson and Hamonic, the pairing, because I know I put like the top 3 pairings based on the numbers, and this was certainly not one of them. And somebody asked for it and was like, well, where's the Sanderson Hamonic pairing? And I'm like, for one, they played like 300 minutes more than anybody else, which is kind of insane. But they had a negative 10 goal differential. Like, it was not good. Their numbers went up throughout the year, but compared to the other pairings, they were lacking. I will say Hamonic does bring some value on the penalty kill. If we look at his, where are we here? If we look at his goals against per 60, he had the second least on the penalty kill at 5.39. The only player less than that was Zaitsev, actually. And that's just how many goals are scored when they're on the ice on the penalty kill on average. Expected goals against too, he was 6th. He blocked a lot of shots in the penalty kill. He also had the second most giveaways on the penalty kill. So it just kind of comes back in the end because he's just kind of a giveaway machine in that sense. But yeah, I mean, on this signing, I think that Hamonic, and he is a good guy in the room, and like everyone's been saying, we want to keep players who want to be here, right? Because that's not a common thing for the Sens, and he has really talked up Ottawa. Like, he said he loves it, his family loves it, he loves that small town feel, and he's kind of a good ambassador for the team. Like, that's how I see it. I also see it as, Pierre Dorion giving out 2 years, and after saying he wasn't going to give out 2 years, and kind of changing his perspective on things. It's just, it's kind of been a blunder for Pierre so far this summer for me, and I find it bizarre when people don't think that. Like, when people think it's going as planned and it's going well so far. I think it could if he like capitalizes on a DeBrincat trade and signs a Tarasenko or Tatar and the lineup looks good again, we'll all be happy. But at the same time, I think so far, based on what we've seen, like, criticism is warranted. I mean, I agree with you on Korpisalo too, but they did overpay for him as well. I'm fine with it. I'm content. They needed a goalie. He was like the only one left, but there's no denying they did take a pretty big gamble, and that could easily. But I like what somebody said on Twitter, and I was thinking this, but I couldn't put it into words. Pierre is signing contracts right now like a guy who knows he's not going to have to worry about them down the line. Like, he's signing, he's like, yeah, I'll give you 7 years, like Jonas, like I'll give you all these years because guess what? I'm probably not going to be here, and then so I'll just send it to the next GM, right? But I don't know. I mean, I'm okay with so far, but I also think that Pierre deserves some criticism for his moves to this point as of July 7th.
Yeah, it hasn't been a bad offseason, but it hasn't been a good one. And like you said, the DeBrincat thing is going to define the offseason one way or another, just like it did last year, kind of, right? I also saw someone on Twitter, though, say that he said they were going to bring in depth pieces on 1-year deals, kind of, shorter term, 1-year deal, whatever it is on price to bolster their already long-term roster. They haven't given out a 1-year deal yet. It's all been, other than the European signings, it's all been multi-years, except for Eric Brandstrom, the only 1-year deal. That's what bothers me. It's like, I'm not doubting that they tried to get Brandstrom for a couple more years. Maybe it was just the agent, but I had a problem with that. That was the first deal they signed. It was on July 1st. The problem I had with that one was, why give him $2 million, which was probably the max that he was going to get on a 1-year deal? Like, it just handcuffed you. And then you go sign Hamonic to 1.1, and then you get MacEwen at league minimum on a 3-year deal. It just, you're right. I think whoever that tweet was from, I think is absolutely on the money. He's just throwing term, which is a dangerous game because that can hinder the team and the new GM that comes in for a lot. Not that I think Hamonic or MacEwen are going to be a problem next season with the cap. They won't be, and that's not the point. The point is he's lying when he's saying we're only comfortable doing a 1-year. He's got the opportunity to come back on a 1-year, and then saying you want to be transparent with the fans, and then a couple days later giving him 2 years on a no move clause. Like, the priorities are shifting on the fly, which I understand this job is all about. You have to, but it's infuriating as a fan, especially with a GM who is clearly, like, his job's on the line here this season and this upcoming year. So nothing again. Like, again, I know there are problems with Travis Hamonic just in those roles, and maybe DJ just plays him all the time. I don't know. The reason I don't like it, DJ or not, it's let's say he is the sixth defenseman and JBD's not there. Like if Hamonic objectively just has a better camp, which is possible, right? Could have a good training camp. If that happens, I don't like the versatility of the top six defensemen anymore that I liked with JBD. You can't throw Travis Hamonic with Thomas Chabot and be okay.
See, but I feel like DJ will, and he'll be happy with it.
No, I know that's the thing. That's the thing. So that's what I'm saying. Like even without DJ, I have a problem with it. Now with DJ there, I am not confident at all. Yeah, that's the problem I have with it. But because again, too, I love the idea of doing Chychrun, Sanderson, Chabot on different pairings. You can have a stud on the ice, a number one defenseman on the ice at all times. If you have a defenseman as their partner, like a JBD, who
they need a good complement. Like
exactly,
in my mind,
exactly.
Hamonic, especially in the first half last season, Hamonic anchored Sanderson. That's the way I put it. And again, he was great as a veteran. I think it was good for Sanderson as a rookie. I'll credit him for that, having the stability or the kind of like confidence in his partner as, you know, as someone he can lean on. But I think like on the ice with the puck, I think he was anchoring Sanderson. And Sanderson still had such a great season, but I think he could have done even better. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but Sanderson, I think, had either a positive goal differential or almost. I think with Zuby was -1, but with every other partner. And then with Hamonic, it was -10. Like, it was just way, way worse. And I just looked at that, and I said it all season, and they kept, like, ignoring the numbers and just putting them back out there. And I think now Sanderson not being a rookie anymore, they really need to avoid that. Like, he can carry a partner now. He can, like, he doesn't need to be, or he shouldn't be anchored. He should be able to have somebody who's a complement, right? Like, he looked great with Zub at the end of the year.
He's the best player back there. He's their best defenseman on any given night. Like, I don't think that's crazy to say. Maybe Jacob Chychrun if he stays healthy right now anyway, but as of the end of the year, Jake Sanderson is the best defenseman on the team. So yeah, you can, but you can't make the same mistake you made with Chabot and throw him with Zaitsev type for the first 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. So yeah, it's a puzzling move. Let's put it like that. I think that's a good way to put it. Not in terms of bringing the player back, because like we said, a good seventh D. And we've also mentioned that Dorian's job is on the line. So is DJ's. He's probably the first to go if things don't go well at the beginning of the year. So we'll see how it all unfolds. I mean, I'm happy for Travis Hamonic. He kind of revitalized his, I don't want to say revitalized, but you know, obviously he's also taking a huge pay cut in the last 3 years. He was making $3 million last year, now down to 1.1. So the AAV is not a problem. The salary is not a problem. It's just the priorities. And if another team was offering him 2 years or even 1 year with more money, like just let him walk. It's not that big of a deal, really. It isn't at all. So that's what's bothering me with that.
My one other point with Hamonic, just to be a little more optimistic on him specifically, because I've been very critical of him, is he was also, like, in fairness to Sanders and everything, he was also subjected to playing that top four role. Like, he averaged, I think, 18:34 last year for ice time, and I just feel like that's about 5 minutes too much for him at this point in his career. Maybe when he was younger, that's fine, but, like, he's getting up there now. He's past his prime. I think, like, we haven't really seen him in a bottom pairing role. I say seventh defenseman would be good. He could be good on the bottom pairing. I mean, if he's only playing 13 minutes a night, maybe that, you know, mental workload, he's making less errors, right? He's able to manage the puck better. He's not having these same problems that he was having. Like, as much as he shouldn't have been paired with Sanderson, it also wasn't his choice. He was just subjected to playing on the second pairing and playing way too much. And that's kind of what I said about him too, is I don't want to hate on him because I love him as a person, I love him as a guy in the room, but almost like Chabot, he's being overworked based on what he should be for him specifically, right? Like, I don't think they realize that. So maybe if he was on the bottom pairing with Brandstrom, he looks like a better player. He's a more versatile player. He's not making the mistakes. So optimistically, I'll allow that. I just really hope they don't revert to, well, this seemed to work last year in our heads, so they put him on the second pairing if things are going poorly. Like, that can't happen. He's your bottom pairing guy or he's your extra. He's not a top four guy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and the top four, you know, classification is I don't know, minutes wise, it doesn't always line up, but it's if you're playing with one of the best players and, like I've just said, the best defenseman on the team, that's a top four role. So yeah, he shouldn't be playing in that role. I'll pivot this. We were going to talk about MacEwen next, but we will get to him and just the forward core and all that. Let's talk about Tyler Kleven. He won the Jonathan Petra Award for hardest worker at development camp for the Senators this week. We didn't really catch much of development camp. Saw some clips. Obviously, it's a great weekend, whatever you want to call it, for the prospects and for all the guys who get drafted. You know, it's right after the draft. It's good to get it to Ottawa. They went to the Red Blacks game or practice, whatever it is, and their workouts there. Like it's a great vibe, I guess, for the city, for the prospects to understand the city and all that. And then the award for the hardest worker goes out to Tyler Kleven this year, and it's perfect because he's a guy, David Bell went on the Locked On Senators podcast and was talking about the relationship he has at these development camps. And with a lot of the top prospects, he actually had a great quote. He said he doesn't want to get to know Tyler Kleven too much because Tyler Kleven, and I've just realized now I've spelt that wrong in Tyler Kelvin, but Tyler Kleven doesn't want to, make the AHL. He's trying to make the NHL. So if he's trying to make the NHL, let's slot him in. You got a choice between Travis Hamonic, Tyler Kleven, and Jacob Bernard Docker. Who are you taking on that bottom pair before camp even happens?
Oof, well, I still like Bernard Docker. I think that he would do well with Brandstrom specifically as well. But Dorian, again, like if we're talking about Dorian lying, not that this would technically be a lie, like it's not a lock, but he said it's Bernard Docker's spot to lose. And at this point with JBD, like it's make it or don't, like that's, yeah, he said it twice actually. But at this point, like if Bernard Docker can't make it, then he's basically done. I mean, they can't keep waiting for him. Because in my mind, I think that as a defenseman and a young defenseman, Kleven would be best served with a year in the AHL. Like this is awesome to see that he won the award, and I know Parker Kelly won that twice. He ended up working his way from undrafted to playing in the NHL. I think he played 56 games last year. But yeah, Kleven is a guy who I see high potential for, and I think he will be a mainstay on their third pairing behind some of those bigger names like Chabot, Sanderson, Kleven. That's a ridiculously good left side. And Kleven, obviously, he brings that third pairing physicality and the brute force that everybody loves. And I think he will be a mainstay there, but I still think he's, 20 years old, 21? Like, in the AHL, man, like that, typically young defensemen, they need that at least 1 year of pro-level hockey. Like, he hasn't played in the pro leagues yet, aside from those 8 games last year. So, he did look great in those games, and I think he should be warranted the opportunity to earn their bottom pairing role. Like, he should have a fair shot during camp, and I think his odds increased with this past development camp. Like, he really impressed. But I still think that a year would be good for him in the AHL. Maybe he gets called up for injuries. I'm sure they'll have injuries on that back end based on the history. So, yeah, he could be definitely a recall guy, but I think you go with Bernard Docker to start, Hamonic as the 7. If JBD's struggling, get Kleven up there and boot JBD out. Like, it's got to be a short leash because you can't have somebody who's screwing your lineup up in a year where it's playoffs or bust, right? Like, it has to be playoffs or bust. So, get the best player in there, but I do think that Kleven's development would be best served with a year in the AHL.
I think so too, but it's tough. After watching those 8 games, man, he was so good at moving the puck, like way better than I thought he would be. I think his underlyings were really, really good too, which is I don't want to say surprising, but as a rookie and as a guy coming up and just playing a few games in a sheltered role, it's impressive. And they've got options, which is again why I think signing Hamonic and adding Matt and Palo or whatever, like it's puzzling, like I said, the Hamonic thing, because yeah, you want a year for Tyler Kleven in the AHL. Ideally, you do, but it's just now there's a logjam all of a sudden, and maybe that's why they gave Brandstrom 1 year. Maybe it was the team just saying 1 year, and that's fine. But I really love the upside that Kleven brought, and I think the last 3-4 months of his development have been huge. Obviously, right, winning the hardest worker. Not to say it doesn't mean he was the best at camp, but showed the hardest work, and we know this team values that a lot, and DJ and Pierre do a lot. So it's nothing to brush to the side. But yeah, the bottom pair this season, I don't think it never is in the NHL, and never, it's never the same 6 guys playing all 82 games. It's going to be a revolving door. It'll be interesting to see how it kind of it unfolds. When we talk a lot about when Chabot or Chychrun or whoever goes down for a couple of games, Brandstrom will be able to step in, play their role on the power play, whatever it is. Then you need a guy who can come in and play Brandstrom's role, right? And that'll be Tyler Kleven, I think. It really will. And I like the idea of him being that depth option. He won't be the scratch. It'll either be a regular in the lineup or the AHL, and I like that. I think it's smart.
Yeah, I just think he's great as the injury option, like the injury recall, because I think he can come in, and I mean, I want to see what he can do over a longer stint. I know we can't really waste time experimenting here, but those 8 games kind of earned him more opportunity in the NHL. Like, that was really impressive. And I agree, that was my main takeaway from him, was that he was moving the puck so well. Like, I thought he'd come in and he'd be he'd be physical and he'd stand out with his size, but I didn't think he'd move the puck like that. His decision-making, too, like, I went back and watched a lot of the film on him, and he just, like, he would really read the ice well, and that's rare for a young defenseman coming from a the NCAA, which is a good men's league, but it's slower. Like the pace is different. You come into the NHL and it's a lot faster. You have less time to react. You've got hard forecheckers on you. He was handling it so well. Like he was not making mistakes. So, I mean, it's hard because you have to respect his development, but at the same time, if he's the best defenseman in camp out of those names you listed, like if he's outplaying JBD and Hamonic, which I honestly think he could be, like I really do, then like how do you send him to the AHL if he's outplaying them in camp? And he was one of the better players at Dev Camp as well. I have to say, like that Kleven Brandstrom pairing with Brandstrom on the right side, that is very, I mean, I like that. That's very appealing. It's a nice complement of size with the smaller Brandstrom, but he can move the puck really well, and they both can. Like, he's the ideal stylistic fit as a partner for Brandstrom, where he comes in and he's that reliable defenseman, and then you've got Brandstrom who can kind of bank on him to pass and stuff and be in position, but he can more focus on his offensive game, which he's never been able to. Like, he's been partnered with Holden and with these depth guys, which he can't really, like, unleash himself. So, yeah, I'm hoping that Kleven can step up and earn a full-time role this year, but I will be cautiously optimistic with him just because he's a young defenseman, and that's kind of how it should be with him, I think. And even though Ottawa needs to win, we do have to also make sure we don't screw up anybody's development along the way.
Yeah, and if this team, this rebuild and everything has done one thing right, it's development pass. We can't really knock anything they've done with any of their top-end prospects, and I would consider Kleven a top-end prospect right now, so... yeah, and also in terms of all those depth guys, he's the only one on a two-way deal. He also makes 120,000 more than JBD in the NHL, so that's obviously going to, if it's between the two of them and you're right up against the cap, you're taking the guy with 800K. So yeah, he won't be a scratch. I think it'll be a pretty steady revolving door between JBD and Hamonic when they're all healthy. I think that's just how it's going to go. So yeah, it'll be interesting to follow. I think that's the blue line, like I've said and like we both said, it's a strength of this team now, which is awesome to say. Finally, we can talk about it, that the blue line is where they're at their strongest right now. And deepest or most, like there's the most depth is on the blue line, which is crazy to say too. So let's pivot to the forwards and Zach MacEwen. I don't have a little headline for it, but I got a headline to follow the headline that I'm just going to say. Zach MacEwen is a enforcer who played in Philly last year, was traded to LA at the deadline, played a few games, played one playoff game for them. He signs a 3-year deal for $775,000 a year, which is league minimum at the moment. Low risk, but 3 years is interesting. So just first, what are your thoughts on him just being signed in general, even before talking about the term?
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually like the signing. I know people were getting pretty angry about it on Twitter. I didn't really sense anger. I mean, I didn't feel any anger. I felt like he's a guy, and I'll say this, he does not offer much aside from his toughness and physicality. He does throw a lot of hits, and he's a big guy. I think he's 6'3", 205, something like that. And he fights a lot. I don't know if he wins a lot of fights, but he does fight a lot. I think part of it is keeping Brady out of the box. Like, now you've got someone who can come in. I think a large part of it was that Toronto signed Ryan Reeves for 3 years, and then Boston got Lucic, and there was one more, unfortunate, that came in the division as well that I'm blanking on. But yeah, like, this division is gritty. The Atlantic is going to be gritty. It's going to be tough. They're going to have a lot of physicality and a lot of opponents who are not willing to, or are not going to shy away from laying the body on our stars. Like you saw Montreal targeting Tim Stützle a couple years ago, where they were just going at him over and over. Like, you can't let that happen, but you also can't let Brady take a 5-minute penalty, every second game. Like, you need Brady on the ice. So this is a guy who I think is the 13th forward, and this is where my one concern came up, is the exact same with Hamonic. It's almost like the same situation, but on offense, where MacEwen should be the 13th forward. He should not be penciled in on the 4th line. Like, I'm hoping they don't see him as just a pure Austin Watson replacement, because he's not. Like, he does not penalty kill. I think he's averaged, like, literally 0 minutes on the penalty kill and 0 seconds through his entire career. He also doesn't block a lot of shots, which is bizarre. He's blocked, like, way less than a shot per game over his entire career. So I don't know exactly what that's all about, but he is a guy who can step in, I think, and at least, like, try to nullify a Ryan Reeves when you're playing Toronto, or I think that's kind of his role, is to be plugged in when the matchup calls for it. When you're going to be playing a team who averages among the most hits and physicality and penalty minutes in the league, you can throw him in there and rely on him to do the fighting instead of Brady, right? Like, that's how I see it. This year in Philly was the first time he averaged more than 10 minutes a game, and that's because Philly was really bad and trying to lose. But again, like, at 775, no real issue here. Like, it's a league minimum contract. I am just going to say, like, I hope we like him, because 3 years is a long time to go if you don't like somebody. but he doesn't have a no movement clause like Hamonic. He could always be buried in the minors if need be, or claimed off waivers. I don't think that would happen, but I mean, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm not upset. I know people were upset with Pierre because he's misevaluated depth in the past and their pro scouting hasn't been good. And MacEwen, like, analytically, he's one of the worst players in the league just based on what he gives you on the ice. But we're going to talk about it. He provides that level of toughness and that sense of grit. And like, when he's on the ice, players have to keep their head up, right? Like, that's kind of how he is. So when you're playing the physicality, and maybe if they get to the playoffs, they could plug him in and do that Chris Neal role from a couple years ago or from 2017. That's the type of guy who would do that, go take out Tanner Glass. Like, that's his role. He's not somebody who's going to contribute points, but he does add an important level of toughness, which Mark Mathot would be happy to tell you all about on Twitter and call you out if you don't believe so.
I was just going to mention Mathot. Yeah. So it's more, I tweeted out that I think it's a great signing in the context of this team likes to have an enforcer out there. It's not a secret. The last few years with, especially under DJ, it's been a staple. I think it's an Austin Watson replacement to me, but you're right. He will not be playing every game. He won't be. And unless he has a stellar camp and he's changed kind of what he does, he won't be. And I remember, especially in that 2021 year, he was on Vancouver, so the Sens saw him a lot. He fought Brady a couple times, and you get him so that Brady doesn't have to do what he did against MacEwen. It's kind of awkward, but that's the thing. It's like, yeah, obviously the game is changing. Fighting isn't as much of a part of it. Not every team has a huge enforcer, but like you mentioned, the Atlantic Division is beefing up. The Leafs got a guy, and the Leafs are the team you're trying to catch, the team you're trying to be and trying to beat at the end of the day. If they get Ryan Reeves for 3 years, having an enforcer is important. And if people don't like that, that's fine. But with the philosophy that the Sens are going by, this is a great signing. It's a cheaper, younger, and better enforcer than Austin Watson was. And you can't really argue that. I think it's pretty obvious. Now, Watson probably overall is a better player right now. He actually had 19 goals the last few years. Not that bad, 9 and 10. When you think about it, when you talk about depth and stuff like that, that's decent for a fourth line player at even strength. MacEwen won't give you 10 goals next year. He probably won't. But if he can go into games where they're playing a Ryan Reeves or they're playing, I don't know, a Tom Wilson on the Capitals or something like that, it's just incentive to not that they're not going to run the Sens stars, because that's going to happen, because the Sens are a physical team. They're going to bring that out of their opponents. You don't need Brady to be the one who answers the bell. If someone's chirping on the bench when Brady's on the bench saying, you won't go, whatever, Brady doesn't have to now, because he was the best fighter on the team. I'd say MacEwen's better than him probably. I don't know, because that's what he does. And like you said, Tkachuk is way too valuable now. He's the captain. He is the second best player on your team right now. He needs to be on the ice. He absolutely does. He makes the team better. So having him sit in the box for 5 minutes at even strength, not ideal. And they've been preaching for years they don't want him fighting. But when your enforcer is Austin Watson, you're not going to be able to fight. You're going to have Brady fight. And I know a lot of people mention, Hamonic can fight, and like people mention a bunch of other just big guys, or like Kleven can fight. Like, it's not just about being a big guy. I don't think MacEwen's huge. He's not huge. It's the role they play, and that's kind of where I was coming from. It's like, I know he's not great analytically. He doesn't have great numbers. He's not a play driver on the fourth line. And ideally, yeah, you want the Sens to go by the Seattle Kraken method and just have four different second lines, essentially, right? That can all drive play 10 to 15 a night, put in 20 goals each. That's the ideal scenario. But if they're going by the philosophy of having an enforcer on your fourth line as your 13th forward, this is a great, great deal. I think this is where term makes sense to me. Just why not match what the Leafs did with Reeves? Why not? It's cheaper, and he's a good fighter too, and he's younger. Makes so much sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I still don't think he should be a mainstay on the fourth line, just because, he should be the guy who kind of is in that revolving door as well, who comes in and out. I would like to see them, and I'm sure they will, but add another depth piece or two. Like, I think they need to do that still. Yeah, but MacEwen, I mean, analytically, it doesn't really matter. Like, he's a fourth line enforcer. That's what he is. There's not even that much more to say about him, because that's literally what he is. He does not drive play or anything, but my one issue with him is the penalty killing. I do wish he had some experience penalty killing, just because you want those bottom six guys to do it. Like I said, though, this really should be, like, in my mind, he should just be someone who you look at who you're playing that night and you say, okay, Are they gonna push us around? Are they gonna like take shots at us? So, who are we playing? Who do they have in the lineup? The way Mathot puts it, and obviously Mathot was, he was a good defenseman, but he was a bit of an enforcer himself. He was a punishing like hitter and a big guy. Like the way he puts it is when that guy is not even just on the ice, but in the lineup, it makes everyone else aware of it. Like everyone on the other team knows he's on that bench, and if they try something, they try some BS, he's gonna hop on the ice next shift and he's gonna take it to them. Like that's exactly what it is. And even if he doesn't do that, like it's just the thought, the idea of knowing that, okay, I gotta watch myself here because if I do something, like they've got a guy who's gonna take a run at me. So that's really what it is. And when he's on the ice, like going into the corner, the opponents have to kind of be wary and they start to get in their own head. Like he is that type of guy, and he does hit a lot, so that's good. Calling Watson an enforcer is hardly even true because he's basically like Watson is not a huge guy either. I don't think. I mean, he looks awfully skinny. I've never looked at his actual height and weight, but he's pretty frail. And he's not a good fighter. I think he might have won one fight in his entire tenure in Ottawa, and that might not even be true. Like he lost almost every fight, and he probably fought like I don't even know. He fought multiple times a year, but he was not a good fighter. I don't think he's the type of guy who the opponent looks at and is like, yeah, I shouldn't take a run because Austin Watson's going to come punch me. Like, no, they're like, yeah, come at me, Austin. Like, it's one punch and he's down, right? So, yeah, you get that.
Well, that's the thing, right? We shouldn't just be saying being a bad fighter is you don't need to win the fight. Like I could care less about winning a fight. It's literally about the intimidation factor if you're going by that philosophy again. And I'm not saying I disagree or agree with it either way, but my thought was right. It's if MacEwen is on the bench for a game, let's say against, I'm just picking teams off by like randomly here, but like against the LA Kings, and they've got Brennan Lemieux, I think, on that team, right? I think he's on the Kings still, or he's in the farm system, whatever.
Now he's not anywhere.
Oh well, I mean, stop biting our captain. Maybe, yeah. There you go. He's a brickhead. But guys like that, right, on good teams who will be put in the lineup, if they're running around finishing their checks on Tim Stützle, let's talk about Montreal. Arbor Jack guy finishing his check and who's a great fighter. He'll be thinking twice about it, knowing that he's got a good matchup against MacEwen if he has to answer the bell. Because before, like you mentioned, Watson wasn't good, and it's not about winning a fight. It's just he was not good at competing, and he wasn't putting fear into anyone when he was fighting, which is fine too. Because I honestly do think Watson was serviceable for what he did, but they could upgrade, and I don't see this as an upgrade on him. It's a replacement for the role the Sens wanted Watson to play,
and it's cheaper.
And I think it's perfect. It's cheaper, younger, better fighter. Like if and I got some pushback on that tweet, but it's just that's how I see it. It's just a all round better replacement for that role that they wanted him to play. And I see nothing but good things. And my thought was very blunt about what he said. I think he was just saying, you don't get it if you didn't play, and like he's right probably. I never played at a level with fighting, but if I did, and I was a skill guy, and it's not about worried about getting hit. It's just that if you get hit once, buddy, like MacEwen's gonna notice it, mention to whoever it is who ran me, be like, do that one more time, we're fighting, and they won't touch Tim Stützle again that night. That's the key, and that's absolutely important in the context. Especially, I don't think people understand the style the Sens play, the hard hitting, everyone hits. Stützle throws the body a lot too. If they're doing that, they're going to get people who want to fight them and want to hit them back. But if you have this enforcer in your lineup at all, even if he's in the press box, like let's be real here, it's just a safety net. It's nice, I would imagine he'll play once against every team this year, like 41 games, whatever it is. He'll play once against every team, probably the first time they play. Just set the tone. He's there. Don't touch our stars. Don't touch Josh Norris. And actually, PK, that actually reminds me. PK, I'd like him to be able to play PK. I do want the bottom six guys there, but Stützle, Norris, Joseph, those guys are all going to be killing penalties. Whoever else is in the bottom six is probably going to be doing it too.
Pinto's a good penalty killer too.
Pinto, like that's four right there. That's four guys who you can roll out over the boards. They don't take a ton of penalties themselves. So I'm not that worried about it because honestly, let's be real, I didn't love Austin Watson on there for most of the time anyway. But yeah, it's not the headline here for those watching on YouTube is toughness versus skill. And it's not really about that. It really isn't. And there's going to be nights probably where, I don't know, Yarventi plays on the fourth line in place of MacEwen. Like it might just not work out. It might, but like you said, if it doesn't, it's buriable. You can bury that contract. You can put him in the AHL, put him on waivers, whatever it is, because they didn't give him a no movement clause.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I know Locked On, they put out a little poll, It was over or under, I think 60.5 games for MacEwen this year. So you're on the under then heavily?
I mean, I guess I that was just kind of a off the cuff
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's just more of a policing thing, but I would say around health permitting, probably just under 50. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, my guess would be about half the games. Like that's what I kind of hope anyway, because I am okay with him being put into the lineup. Like the last thing I want to see, and like I'm not huge on the whole toughness thing all the time. I do think that like analytics matter and whatnot, but like the last thing I want to see is Ottawa's stars go out there and start to get people running at them because they're they don't have that guy in the lineup. That's the worst thing that could happen. So I do want to see him in the lineup on a I don't know, every few games I'd say would be a good, like, that's fine with me, whatever. Send the message. But as a whole, it's the same with Hamonic. I need DJ to not, like, make me go crazy because these last few years, the Zaitsev thing, I can't get over. I will never get over it. Even when DJ's gone, I can't get over him pairing Shabbat in his developmental years with Nikita Zaitsev. I just hated that. And he just kept doing it too. And then with Sanderson with Hamonic, like, this year, and we can all say it doesn't matter, they weren't supposed to be good, that's fine. They have to be good now. So like if MacEwen's in the lineup and when he's in, like Watson, Ottawa's fourth line is getting hemmed in their own zone every single shift and they are terrible, like you have to adjust. I mean, I know you need to send a message, but it has to be to an extent. Like he's had a negative goal differential at 5v5 in 4 of his 5 career seasons. So I'm not saying that that's like the case, and obviously he would start in more defensive situations, but you just have to be able to recognize when something's not working. And that fourth line last year was bad. Like they got hemmed in constantly every shift to the point where the other coach was like trying to match up with Ottawa's fourth line, just trying to screw them because they were so easily beatable, right? They were just lost on the ice. So MacEwen, like the signing. I like the guy. He seems like a really he's one of those character guys like Hamonic who it seems like the team's going to love him in the room. And he's going to be here for 3 years. So like I said, hopefully he becomes a fan favorite because it's going to be a painful 3 years if he's one of those guys. It's also why I don't want DJ to play him constantly is because people will very quickly turn on a player if DJ is like basically screwing them. Like if he's like Hamonic in the top 4 last year, if he's overusing somebody to the point where it's negatively impacting them, people and the fans are going to not like the player for it. So I'm hoping MacEwen can kind of come into his role as the 13th guy, accept that. DJ accepts it. We get somebody else for the fourth line. MacEwen can come in for injuries too. Like he can be on that fourth line. He can move everybody up. That's fine. But if that's the case, it's going to be a fun 3 years because he is a guy that can punish people. And you can go watch his fights on, I think, hockeyfights.com or whatever. It's just got all of his fights. And I haven't even really watched it. I don't know if he's actually a good fighter or not, but he's a relatively big guy, 6'3", 205. And he's someone who is not scared to throw the knuckles, right? So regardless, it's a fine signing. They've got their toughness. That's the first thing I posted on Instagram when I saw it because I was at work, but I saw that and I said, yeah, we got our toughness. Like, that's it. Ryan Reeves signed in Toronto for 3 years. We got MacEwen for, I think, $400,000 to $450,000 cheaper, and we got him. I'm fine with that. Like, I'm happier with that than I would have been with Reeves.
Yeah, we're gearing up here for a Leaf Sens series. It's gonna happen, folks. Let's just accept it. It's in the cards. Maybe not next year, but eventually it's gonna happen. And the Leafs added grit and toughness this offseason. That's what they did. They got Domi, Bertuzzi, and Reeves. That's what they're trying to go for. Yeah, Bertuzzi's a great player. He played in the top 6, but he's a rat, and they needed more of that. So the Sens, they don't need to match it because they're not, neck and neck all the time. But that's the plan. They want to be. They want to be top 3 in the division. So of course they would add the same kind of sandpaper stuff. So yeah, it makes sense. My first thought was it's a Ryan Reeves match. I thought that was pretty obvious. The 3-year thing made the most sense, and that's why it happened. Yeah, and this all hinges though on how good the top 3 lines are. We've talked a lot about the depth and stuff like that. We've talked a lot about mixing and matching the top 9 and all that, how you need to be able to do that. So again, it comes back to whatever the DeBrincat return is. If it's 2 middle 6 guys and then they sign a Tarasenko, we're having a much different conversation about Zach MacEwen. But if it's in the context of Dylan Gambrell as your third line center with, Patrick Brown on the wing and then MacEwen on the fourth line, they're screwed. And that happened because of injuries and long-term injuries, all of that. But this signing isn't made in that regard. It's made in the regard of we're going to still add pieces to our middle 6 that can help. I would expect whatever the DeBrincat trade is, I would expect the Sens to still add 2 guys who can play in the middle 6, whether it's Tarasenko, Tatar, someone through trade with DeBrincat, at least 2, maybe 3 if they can get more from Detroit or whoever.
So you think they need,
goes.
with the holes in their lineup right now, they should add 2 more forwards? Do you think? Well, a DeBrincat replacement and 2 more forwards is what you're saying.
Yeah, so let's say I'm in quotations because it's not obviously perfect, but Tarasenko replaces DeBrincat. I think that's as close as it's going to get in terms of what's available. And then because everyone's talking about it, it's Detroit seems like the front runner here. You get Berggren
And
and
Kubalik,
Kubalik.
I
Like that
love
would
that.
be, dude, that would be so good because
Love that.
you don't have to rush Ridley Gregg, and
Hmm.
you can that would be same first line. You could go Tarasenko, Norris, Batherson, Kubalik, Berger, and Pinto, and then like Joseph on your fourth line at that point, right? Like,
Yeah,
is that too
if it's
much?
cap compliant, I don't know.
Right, I don't know if it would be, but
You might
like
have to
I think
trade
it's
somebody.
like Kubalik would be perfect. Like I'd even take Kubalik back instead of Bergeron, but like you know what I'm saying? Like I think two pieces, even so let's say they get Bergeron, Kubalik, and a pick without signing Tarasenko, that's still okay to me. Like
It's
because
my
you can,
perfect trade. That's the first mock I ever did for DeBrincat. That's
yeah,
exactly what I want right there. I don't know if they'll get that
yeah.
much though. Like, it's hard to
I don't know.
tell.
I'm so tired of speculating too. It's just so exhausting because I don't know. No one knows. It's all what we want. If we're saying we will, I actually, you know what's funny? I think Sens fans are being extremely reasonable with mock trades that I've seen. I know you are. I know that a lot of people are. Red Wings fans need a glass of reality. You're not getting Alex DeBrincat signed for 8 years without giving up a roster player. It's not going to happen. The Sens won't do that. The Sens would rather take DeBrincat back, move other money out somehow. They would trade Joseph and a first round pick to be cap compliant with DeBrincat. They'd pinch pennies with Shane Pinto to be cap compliant with DeBrincat rather than taking back a first and a second. They need people on their roster for next season because shocker Red Wings fans, the Sens are better than you right now, and they will be after this trade regardless of what happens. That's a fact. So I think that I mean, I shouldn't say that's a fact. If the trade happens, it will not make the Sens worse tomorrow, as much as it might seem like that.
Well, and I know that and I know Ian wrote an article on it, but how like you're just trading in division and people shouldn't be scared of that. And I agree, like it's not a huge deal, but I still think it needs to be noted that we're trading. It's not
Yeah,
just in
I'm
division.
terrified of
It's
it.
not
I'm
just in
terrified.
division though. It's with a team who's on like almost the same timeline as us. Like this is a team with how the playoff format works now, who we're probably going to be playing against. Like this is like the Red Wings are what a year or two behind Ottawa as it stands in their rebuild, kind of, and they've kind of like I don't know what Eiserman's doing with the whole signing Cop and Comfort at like 5 year deals at ridiculous money, but and Justin Hall for $3 million a year, like it makes me happy. I mean, I hope they fail, but I'm just saying if you're trading them a guy who, as Pierre has said, is probably going to rebound and score at least 30, 35 goals, and maybe even 40 if he's playing with Larkin, like if you're trading a guy to your rival who is not just a rival but on the same contention window as you, and they're going to be in the playoffs sooner than later, like you have to be careful. You can't just accept futures for that. Like you have to take from their roster. So I love Berggren. Like he really gets me excited. I'm hoping that he's involved. Um, Kubalik too would be a great fit as a guy who could help right now. Um,
Soderblom, 6'8",
yeah,
that's decent.
Soderblom. Like, and he could play now. I think he played 30 games last year.
He was
Like,
good. He was good. I like
yeah,
him.
and it seems like Detroit is going to be the partner. Like, we can do a little DeBrincat update based on what we know as of July 7th. I mean, it's like everybody's been saying. I mean, I know Martian has been, and he's got his sources, but David Pagnotta too. I know Friedman also said like they're almost at the end of it here. Like they're right there. They're inching towards the finale. It seems like it's going to happen in the next, I don't know, I'd say week. I don't actually know a timeline, but based on what all the insiders are saying, it seems like we're basically at this point maybe negotiating a contract for DeBrincat. Like that's where it seems like it's at, based on the reports. So we should be ready for an emergency pod over the next few days, I suppose. A little bit of a busy weekend, but I'm sure we'll make it work if that happens. And yeah, I mean, with how long this is taking, I'm just hoping that Pierre is going to get the right return. Like with how long it's taking, surely he knows he's got to get the right pieces back. And if not, then you've got to just keep waiting and try and maybe keep him for the year or whatever it might be. But yeah, I'm excited about the return here, and I'm not going to stop updating Twitter. My life is on pause until Alex DeBrincat is traded. It's just such a massive deal for the next season. Like it really next season is so reliant on this trade. It's kind of unbelievable to be honest with you. Like there are so many marbles here in the bag. So Pierre, like, come on, get us a good return. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's the hope. Before we end it here, I want to do a little mock lineup comparison. I'm going to do a mock lineup top line comparison between Ottawa and Detroit. Like you mentioned, they're on similar timelines. I think the Sens hit on draft picks more than the Red Wings have so far. Obviously Sider has been great. Raymond is still promising. He just had a down year last year, but like the Sens have Stützle, Sanderson, Kachuk that they've got to spear make their rebuild faster. So let's compare top lines, because let's say DeBrincat goes to Detroit. You've got DeBrincat at 8 years, Larkin 8-year extension starts next year too, and then uh, Lucas Raymond on that top line. That would probably be their top 3 forwards. I don't know if they'll actually play together, but that's their top line versus the Senators with Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and I'm not going to use Claude Giroux because he's not gone, but 2 years from now, who knows? I'm just talking long-term first line. So it goes Stützle, Tkachuk, and Drake Batherson. What first line are you taking? And I know we're obviously going to be biased here. It's Everyday Sens. I'm taking the Sens line 10 out of 10 times, and it's not even close.
Well, definitely, yeah. I mean, I would take Tim Stützle over those three players. No, like I just think Timmy's gonna be like a top. I gotta be careful, like a top 15 player in the league. I mean, I think he's legitimately. I think he breaks 100 points this year. He's gonna be a premium player. He already is. He's 21 years old, for God's sakes. Like I have their lineup too pulled up on Cap Friendly. Like Larkin is a great player. He scored 32 goals and 79 points through 80 games this year. I mean, he's 26. Tim is 21 and he scored 39 goals and 90 points this year in less games than Larkin. Like, come on. I mean, that's a huge upgrade right there. And when Tim's 26, what is his point total going to be? It's going to be like 130 points. Like, no, I mean, I'm being a bit bold, but I don't like Raymond's coming off a down year. I think that if you said Batherson, they're kind of similar. I like Raymond, but Tkachuk then has, in my mind, a pretty substantial margin on DeBrincat as well, just based on not just the points that he scored this year and everything, but and I do like DeBrincat, but like Brady's obviously got that size. He's got all the intangibles. Like he's your ultimate playoff guy, right? So for me, it's definitely Ottawa's top line over Detroit's.
The way I see it is probably this extension is probably going to make DeBrincat the highest paid player on the Red Wings long term. I Larkin signed it. You probably got it pulled up there. What he's 8 point something, 8.5
He
maybe.
is 8.7.
Oh
They're
wow.
going to be
Okay, so
strapped
he's
too with
way.
the DeBrincat deal. Goodness.
Yes. Well, I'm just so that's DeBrincat is probably. I mean, honestly, speculation here, pure speculation. The reported ask by DeBrincat was 8.775. I'd imagine the holdup right now is the extension in that exact number. I don't know if the Red Wings want to give him more than the captain, but it's probably right around there. So anyway, the fact that that trade would make DeBrincat on their top line, and yeah, it's a worthy conversation. What top line would you rather? Blah blah blah. Especially with Giroux out of the picture, but you know the funny thing is that DeBrincat was on the Sens. He was here and couldn't be better than Brady Tkachuk. So I'm taking the Sens 10 out of 10 times. We're trading our second line winger to be your first line winger. That's how I see it. It shouldn't hinder either team, really. I don't think it'll make either team that much better, but it can just be, it should be a lateral move for both, I would think.
For sure, it should. And I've just got this Red Wings lines here pulled up on Cap Friendly. I mean, looking at this lineup, I'm biased, but I'm so much in favor of Ottawa. I'm sorry, but I mean, right now it's hard to even say because Ottawa doesn't really have a second line left wing or third line players or a fourth line. Like, there's just so many holes in the Sens right now. But I just think that their core is so much better than a lot of these other teams that are around them. Like, Detroit has some very enticing prospects too, who I'm sure will end up earning NHL roles. But you look at Ottawa's core, and you look at, like you said, Tkachuk, Stützle, Batherson, but then you go to defense, and Norris is included there too. I always forget about Norris. Most people do because he didn't play last year, but you've got Shabbat, Sanderson, Chychrun, and Chychrun's going to be signed long term, I would assume. That is a pretty insane core, and now Korpisalo is kind of part of it too, to be honest with you, for at least 4 years. That's a really good core. Like I need to go through and actually compare Ottawa's core under 26-year-old players or 26 and under-year-old players to some of the other teams that are on competing timelines, because I think that they have to be like surely they're top three. I mean, this core has so much skill, but it's also got the size, it's got the playoff ability. Like they're built for the playoffs. That's how I've always seen the players they've acquired, except for DeBrincat based on the size, if we're going to talk like that. But like that's why I'm just so desperate to see them in the playoffs, is I think they're built for it. I think they're the team who could be the Florida Panthers who surprise. Like that's the type of team that I see based on just how their lineup is built. And it starts with Brady Tkachuk. Like, do you see them the same way? Do you think they're going to be one of those kind of built for the playoff teams? I don't think they're a soft lineup is kind of how I'm putting it.
No, they really are. And we've had a lot of conversations just about Yeah, it's great that they're built for the playoffs, and it's all this Brandstrom. You know, there's probably going to be a lot of Brandstrom versus Kleven discourse this season, I'm imagining, and like ideally playoff wise, probably Kleven, but at the same time, the rest of the Sens core, the way Tim Stützle plays hockey is so perfect to me. Like he plays a heavy game, he's a big kid, and he's so skilled. Like he's such a fun hockey player to watch. So yeah, it's interesting. You know what we should do this summer when we get into the dog days in August, and if you're, you know, when you're tuning in here, subscribe so you can stay tuned for this content. Uh, is a comparison, lineup comparison when everything's kind of set in stone of a core comparison, let's say, with Detroit, with Buffalo, and with New Jersey, because I think those are the three other teams that are on the same timeline. Buffalo is interesting because Buffalo, like I am, that's a tough one. I think Buffalo has I'm not gonna say better. I think it's you can go back and forth being, oh yeah, you know, Tage Thompson and Tim Stützle, who's better, and then Kachuk and whoever, or
Well, it doesn't
Dylan
help that they just
Cousins.
drafted Benson, who's lighting up like all the highlights
Oh,
on my Twitter feed now. I'm like,
and
really at 13? Like
and
you get
Matthew
him at
Savoie
13?
last year. Like they've
Oh,
just got these studs who
I'm
are
jealous of their pull.
undersized. Yeah, that'll be a problem in maybe 2, 3 years. I'm saying next season because Buffalo finished 1 point out of the playoffs and they bolstered their blue line a little bit, but didn't make any huge moves anyway.
Their
As of
goaltending is the
now,
one question. I think they're going to rely on Levi, which is a bit risky as a young goalie.
it is risky. Yeah, yeah. I guess they are. They didn't want Corpusalo, or maybe just maybe Corpusalo chose Ottawa over Buffalo. We'll never know. That could be. We're in different times here. Obviously, we didn't even mention Michael Andlauer was at development camp. Nice shots of him. Good pictures of some fans. He looks great. He looks like he's ready to be an Ottawa Senator for life. So it's good to see a lot of stuff going on. Hopefully by this weekend, sometime, maybe even after this drops, Alex DeBrincat will be traded. We will be there live to break it down whenever it happens at some point this weekend. We will also be back for episode 23 on Monday. So thank you everyone for listening. Again, we're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the training camp or by the opener in October. So we will hopefully see you all there. So thank you everyone for joining. We will see you on Monday.